So why are we mad about audits? Why don't we talk about it? Hi, I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick, and today's episode is brought to you by FootJoy Hoodies. No, I'm not sponsored by them. I'm just wearing one right now, and it's super soft and comfortable, and it's like a warm hug, which is good when you're about to talk about financial stuff. So, as everybody knows, the Department of Governmental Efficiency is going through data in the U.S. government, blah, 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 blah. We're not going into any of the political arguments today, although we probably inevitably will, and what I just said will be proven to be a lie. What I'm going to just say is I wanted to start with, why are people mad about the audits and about the contracts that are getting clawed back, as it were, or stopped? Well, in the United States, there are two buckets of people, particularly when it comes to what the government efficiency people are doing. There are those that are being paid and those that are doing the paying. To put it very simply, if you want to know who's being paid, look who's complaining about the Department of Governmental Efficiency. And I literally don't mean that in a pejorative way. I mean that simply in a way of, you'll know if somebody's one of the people being paid from one of these contracts because they're complaining that the contract has been canceled. That's just a statement of fact. And if you want to know who's doing the paying, look in the mirror. Every tax season, I'm reminded that I don't like taxes. No one does. We complain about them every year. The stand-up comedy routines have been made entirely on, oh my God, I have to pay taxes again this year. The whole United States tax system makes no sense in general. We have this system of sort of magic fairy dust where the U.S. government knows how much we're supposed to pay, but we have to come up with the number that we're supposed to pay so that we don't go to jail. And if we get the number wrong, they know we got it wrong, and so we go to jail. It just doesn't make any sense. And then, of course, there was the IRS quote from a couple years ago where somebody was like, why does the IRS audit poor people more often than rich people? And it's the IRS said, well, it's because we don't have the manpower or the wherewithal or the knowledge to audit the truly rich, so we focus on auditing the poor, which sounds like lobby. Anyway, that's a whole different issue. Let's focus on the efficiency issue. So, the two buckets of people. We have the payors and the payees. Those doing the paying and those receiving the pay. Those doing the paying should be less upset that they're seeing what they're paying for, and more upset perhaps that we're paying for such things. For example, there was one contract that was canceled that the people who were receiving the money for the contract were very, very upset about. And it was, no joke, a contract to teach some form of art to people in Afghanistan. Now, there may very well be societal value in the teaching of art to people in a different country. And there may very well be, especially in a country that we are focusing on, particularly Afghanistan and Iraq, where we were focusing on nation-building efforts. But two questions to answer about that. Is that the biggest focus that we should have over in Iraq, or Afghanistan? And is the U.S. government the best place to receive the funding for that from? I ask that question only because we had a lot of other very, very pressing issues. We still have pressing issues in that area that do not involve the teaching of modern art. Now, we may say that those issues of the teaching of modern art is still important, But we may also say that the U.S. government is perhaps not the entity which should be issuing that money for two reasons that come to mind. Number one, that money is being issued from an entity that has no money. The U.S. government, as a body, has no money. It only has the money that it can get from taxpayers. So it's not their money, it's your money. It's money being used on your behalf in the interests of the collective. So is this in the interests of the collective? I don't know. I didn't ask the collective. I didn't take a vote to see if the collective thought that this was a good idea or not. So we might perhaps think to ourselves that this is probably not in the realm of things we should be doing from the government level. From a private industry level, that is perhaps a wonderful thing we should be doing. Also, the government is not the most efficient method of doing that. What do I mean by that? Typically speaking, the government, to spend $1, typically spends roughly double. Call it $2, but it's usually somewhere in the realm of $1.50 to spend $1. The biggest joke of the penny is a 1 cent coin that costs 3 cents to make. It doesn't make any sense. So the contract that was canceled, that the person receiving the contract was very upset about, it was $1 million contract. The $1 million contract actually cost roughly $2 million in terms of the administration and the reading of the application to receive the contract and everything else. By the time you got done, it's roughly a $2 million contract to issue that $1 million. So it sucks. It's a bad use of money to spend it in that way. Now that's an extreme example throughout the government. There's extreme examples throughout the government everywhere you go. There's another big example that you can point to and just say to yourself, this is the example that we might say to ourselves, well, I don't like that. Something that is clearly in the national interest and something that is clearly within the powers of the government. The Department of Defense. Now, the Department of Defense has a roughly $850 billion budget, is somewhere in that realm. It is also, as a whole, the Department of Defense, which covers Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, Coast Guard's under Homeland Security. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, Space Force. It's a real branch of the military now. I have to say it. You have to hear it. Anyways, the Department of Defense, with that $850 billion budget, has never once passed an audit. Now, private companies are audited every year as a matter of course. They have to be. And they have to pass that audit. They don't get to just not pass the audit. If they don't pass the audit, they have to correct the issues that appeared, so they pass the audit. Or bribe the auditor, one of the two. But the Department of Defense has never passed an audit. That's a problem. Because if $850 billion is being spent and we don't even know how it was spent, how can we correct issues? You can't correct how you're spending money if you have no idea how you're spending it. So what are we spending it on? That's a huge question, especially since the rank and file in our military, and I'm quoting a lot from a Jon Stewart interview that has been making the rounds, but it's just also true if you just look it up. Our military, they end up on food stamps. And not like, 4-star generals. The privates who make up the large majority of the fighting force. Whatever your ranking system is until they get above, essentially, not poverty line, but they get above a certain pay grade, a lot of them end up needing extra assistance. Extra assistance that comes from the government. Again, inefficient but necessary. That's a good use of money if you're using it correctly. Again, you have to audit that program. But if you don't even know how you're spending the money, if you're buying bunches of missiles and drones from your buddies at Boeing, at Lockheed Martin, and all that good stuff, Great. Those are things military should buy, but do we know how much we're spending on it? Are we asking? That's what the Department of Government Efficiency is for, is to ask that question. Are we spending this money efficiently? Because the government inherently is an inefficient means of spending money, but it has to, so we need to do it in the most efficient manner possible. The government's not a charity. It's not designed to donate money on behalf of the American people, because the American people would perhaps prefer not to donate to certain causes, and they have a right not to. Now, granted, some in the United States may prefer not to pay for food stamps, but you need to have social welfare programs. Those are a necessary function of the government. That's a performance of a body for the collective good. Military, defense of the country, same thing. Some people would prefer not to spend money on a military. You have to have a military. It's unfortunately a reality of the world. Some people would prefer not to spend money on embassies overseas. We should audit those embassies and make sure they're spending money wisely, or, being designed efficiently, perhaps matching the country that they're in. But you need an embassy in countries so that you have a political presence. Other countries do it, and you have to do it as well. Are we spending money efficiently? And you don't ask this question just of things that are politically expedient. You ask it about everything. Is the IRS efficiently spending money? Would the IRS perhaps be able to audit rich people if it spent money more wisely? Yes, we should ask those questions. Is Homeland Security spending money wisely? That's definitely a question you want to ask. But you have to audit all of it, not just some of it. Look, my time is roughly coming to a close. I forgot to start a timer, so I rambled here and I have no idea how much time I took. But let me just ask you this in closing of this conversation with myself. If you went to the grocery store, you spent $1,000. Your groceries were bagged for you. You were handed the bag. You put it in the cart. You're going out to your car. You open the bag. Let's say you thought you bought a dozen eggs, but all you got was 6 eggs. You would want to know what happened to those 6 eggs. You look at the receipt. The receipt just says eggs. It doesn't say how many eggs you received. That was $1,000. You got $500 worth of stuff. And when you go back inside, you find out that you only got the 6 eggs because they took half your money and used it to buy chalk to paint the outside of their building with. Not only that, but your $500 that they took wasn't enough to buy the chalk, so they had to borrow $1,000 from somebody else to complete the chalk project. And the chalk project didn't even cover the building, which it was supposed to. You would rightly want to ask the questions of what the flip happened. That is hopefully what the Department of Government Efficiency is doing. And I go and I look at the lists of what they're auditing and what's coming back and the things, and most of the things I see are things that are fairly silly and should not be done by government. You might disagree with me. If you do, sound off in the comments. Happy to discuss, happy to be yelled at, whatever. Subscribe if you liked what I rambled about, or don't. It won't break my heart. Anyways, I'm out of time. I'm Nick. This is 10 Minutes with Nick. Have a great day.